everyone. Welcome back to Straight Down the Middle. Today's episode, the deportation of Mahmoud Khalil. Is it legal? And I got to tell you something up front. This is not an easy case. People on both sides, they're going to tell you open and shut, constitutional violation, open and shut, get this guy out of here. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to understand the law, this case is a maze of statutory and constitutional issues. And I'm going to break them all down for you. I'm going to go through each one, explain it to you, and as always, I'll give you the arguments on both sides so that in the end, you can make up your own mind. All right, let's jump in. So, who is this guy, Mahmoud Khalil? Khalil is a recent graduate of Columbia University. And by all accounts, he's been a leader in the anti-Israel protests that have roiled that campus. He's said to be a prominent spokesman for and negotiator for an activist group there. Let me get the name of the group right. It's the Columbia University Apartheid Divest Group. And that group, according to its own words, its self-described words, is fighting for the eradication, the total eradication of Western civilization. I'm quoting their own description. Now, that group, in turn, is said to be primarily responsible or a driving engine behind the encampments and the building occupations that have caused so much chaos at Columbia University. Now, Khalil was arrested just a few days ago, March 8th, from his New York home, and he's now being detained in Louisiana. On March 10th, a federal court in the Southern District of New York stayed his deportation proceedings. That was not a ruling on the merits. The court is just saying we're going to stay it for now until there can be a hearing and there can be briefs filed. And that's what a judge should do. He did the right thing. He's going to let briefs be filed. He's going to give Khalil a chance to be heard. And he says then he'll make a decision. Now, there's a chance this judge doesn't get to keep the case. The judge may have to transfer it to Louisiana. That's what the government's going to want to do. But Khalil's lawyers are going to try to keep it in New York. Now, the first question is, what are the grounds on which the government claims to be able to deport this guy? What statute do they point to say that this deportation is lawful? So, this is where we hit all the statutory issues that I was referring to before. First set of issues in the case, statutory issues. There's a statute out there, the Immigration and Naturalization Act, that says that aliens can be deported if they espouse or endorse terrorist activity. That's striking in itself. It doesn't say that the alien has to have engaged in criminal activity. It doesn't say that the alien has to have given material support, like money or work, to a terrorist organization, an organization that's been categorized as a terrorist organization by the United States. It doesn't say any of that. If you espouse or endorse terrorist activity and you're an alien, you can be deported. So that's the first provision that the government's likely to rely on here. There's another provision too. There's a provision that says that aliens can be deported for their beliefs or statements if the Secretary of State determines that their continued presence in the United States would compromise a compelling United States foreign policy interest. So the first set of issues in this case is going to be whether those statutory provisions are satisfied. The government's going to say, yeah, this guy endorses and espouses terrorist activity. His defenders are going to say, what are you talking about? Show us one sentence that he's ever said. Give us one quotation from anything he's ever said where he espouses or endorses terrorism. No, he doesn't. He believes in nonviolence. He believes in peaceful protest. His defenders are going to say, what are you talking about? Show us one sentence. Show us one quotation where he's ever expressly endorsed or espoused terrorist activity. He doesn't, they'll say. He believes in peaceful protest. Now, these are going to be statutory issues. Is the statute satisfied? And, we don't know the answer. I don't know. We don't know what evidence the government has. I can tell you this. Just a day or two ago, the government asserted that they now had evidence that Khalil had personally distributed pro-Hamas flyers with the Hamas logo that extolled what the flyers called Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. Now that's the Hamas name for October 7th. So if this is true, if he distributed flyers extolling October 7th, well, that's probably endorsing terrorist activity. Because October 7th was clearly terrorist activity, and extolling it would seem like endorsing terrorist activity. So if that's true, what they're saying, that he distributed these flyers, they're going to have a pretty good case that that statutory provision is satisfied. Okay, is that the end of the case? Of course not. That just brings us now to the fundamental issue in the case. The fundamental issue in the case is, are those statutory provisions constitutional, or do they violate the First Amendment? That's going to be the key question in the case. And one thing is clear. If Khalil had been arrested solely for expressing support for October 7th, solely for espousing or endorsing terrorist activity, that would be a clear violation of the First Amendment if he were a citizen. Because in this country, political opinions are protected speech, no matter how abhorrent they are. If you express support even for the sickest terrorist butchers like Hamas, that's still, in this country, protected speech if you're a citizen. In fact, let's say Khalil had committed some non-speech, non-protected acts like blocking Jewish students from getting to certain places on campus. But if the true reason why he was arrested was his pro-Palestinian or anti-Israeli opinions, even that would be enough to give him a constitutional claim. Because the government can't retaliate against you for your political opinions, even if they have something else they could have gone against you for. If the true reason was they didn't like your political opinions, that gives you a First Amendment retaliation claim, if you're a citizen. But he's not a citizen. As I said, he's a green card holder, and you might be thinking all this time, well, green card holders they're not aliens, are they? Yes, they are. A green card holder is a lawful permanent resident of the United States, but they're still aliens as a legal matter. There's no doubt about that. So he's not a citizen, he's an alien. And the question is, the million-dollar question is, whether or when, or to what extent, do aliens have the same constitutional rights as citizens? And that, my friends, is the tough question that you got to think about and that you got to look at a lot of cases to try to understand. The first thing that folks favoring this deportation, opponents of Khalil, those who want to support the Trump administration, first thing they're going to do is they're going to point to cases like Turner versus Williams, decided more than 100 years ago, 1904, where the Supreme Court said that aliens can be deported for expressing views that Congress determines to be so dangerous that having aliens who harbor those views would not be a good addition to American society. Yeah, that's what the court said in Turner in 1904. In fact, the Turner court went a little further. It almost suggested that aliens have no constitutional rights at all. Let me read you exactly what the Turner court said so you can see what I'm talking about. Here's the quote. Aliens, quote, who are excluded by Congress cannot assert the rights in general obtaining in a land to which they do not belong as citizens. Well, that's strong stuff. Sounds like aliens don't have constitutional rights, and Turner is still good law today, still cited as good law today. So I've seen stuff online on social media saying, hey, Turner disposes of this case, all over. It's not all over, not even close. Turner is just the beginning of this story, not the end. Because look, just 15 years after Turner, 1919, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, he handed down one of the most celebrated opinions in American constitutional history. It was a case called Abrams. And in his Abrams opinion, Justice Holmes was looking at these defendants who had been prosecuted for distributing anti-war leaflets. This is during the First World War. And Congress had passed a statute saying that's a sedition offense, that's a criminal offense, opposing the war in certain contexts. And the majority of the Supreme Court upheld that conviction, threw the guy in jail for distributing his anti-war flyers. Well, Justice Holmes wrote this dissent, and it is now considered one of the great dissents in American jurisprudential history. And he said, the defendants in this case had as much right to publish their dissident opinions as the government has to publish the Constitution of the United States, now vainly invoked by them, he wrote. He said, I'm speaking only of expressions of opinion. But he added, "I regret that I cannot put into more impressive words my belief that in their conviction upon this indictment, the defendants were deprived of their rights under the Constitution." Now here's why I'm bringing this case up. This is what people forget about Abrams. The defendants in that case, they weren't citizens. They were aliens. They were Russians. So Abrams stands for the opposite holding, that aliens do have constitutional rights. Why do I say that? Because Holmes didn't say, now wait a minute, it's a problem. These guys are aliens. They don't have constitutional rights. And guess what? The majority justices who rejected the First Amendment claim, they didn't say so either. No justice said, now hang on, these are aliens. I mean, the majority opinion says they're aliens. They're not citizens. They're Russians. But the majority doesn't say, oh, so that makes this case easy. They're aliens. They don't have constitutional rights. See Turner. Forget about it. Go home. Not one justice in the Abrams case says that. No, they all take it for granted. They take it as settled that aliens do have constitutional rights. And in subsequent cases, over the decades, the court has not only endorsed Holmes's great dissent, but they have expressly held that the freedom of speech is accorded to aliens in this country. So what's going on here? How can you have Turner on the one hand, aliens don't have free speech rights, and Abrams on the other, yes they do? Well, here's what's going on. Let me explain it to you. Turner involved aliens who were outside the United States or who were trying to get in illegally. That's right, back in 1904, they had the concept of illegal aliens just as we do now. And Turner was addressed to those aliens outside the country and those who are trying to enter illegally. I want to read you a quote from Turner so you know what I'm talking about. Here's the quote. An alien, quote, does not become one of the people to whom these rights are secured by our Constitution by an attempt to enter forbidden by law. That's what the court is saying in Turner. Illegal aliens, they don't have the same constitutional rights as citizens. Whereas in Abrams, they were lawful resident aliens, so yes, they did. Okay, Professor, now at least we have our answer, right? So Khalil, this guy's a lawful resident alien, so he wins, right? He's got constitutional rights. Not so fast. The court has never held that just the moment an alien enters the country lawfully, they get all the constitutional rights that citizens have. The court's never held that. Instead, the court has developed this doctrine over the years that says that aliens acquire more and more constitutional rights the more connections they develop to the United States. When an alien develops substantial connections to the United States, the court has held, then he gets constitutional rights. Now, you might object to this doctrine because you might think it's kind of murky or subjective, but that's the doctrine. Been the doctrine for decades, and I don't think the Supreme Court's going to retreat from that doctrine in this case. So the question then becomes, well, wait a minute, does this guy Khalil have substantial connections to the United States? The defendants in Abrams, they've been here for 5 to 10 years. Well, how about Khalil? He's been in the country less than 2.5 years by his own statement, came in on a student visa back in December of 2022. But wait a minute, he's married to a U.S. citizen. He has a green card, which is usually considered the gold standard of substantial connections to the United States. And he and his wife are expecting their first child next month. And that child will be a citizen of the United States, even under President Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. That child's going to be a U.S. citizen. So I'll tell you what, I think any reasonable person who knows something about the law is going to have to concede that Khalil does have substantial connections to the United States, the kind of substantial connections that translate into constitutional rights. Okay, you're going to say, Professor, now finally at last, we've got a clear answer, right? So Khalil's a lawful resident, he's got substantial connections to the United States, so he's got constitutional rights, so a citizen could not be punished for his political opinions. Case closed, right? This is a violation of the First Amendment. It's all done. Easy case, open and shut, right? Nope, it's still not open and shut. Case is still not closed, and let me tell you why. The supporters of this deportation, they're going to say that this case arises in a very distinctive context. Deportation, and that's true. This is a deportation proceeding. And the supporters of deportation, they're going to say this is not like Abrams. Abrams, that's a prosecution. Yeah, if Congress today passed a criminal statute saying, you know what, nobody in this country can express pro-Palestinian opinions anymore. Nobody can express anti-Israel opinions, you go to jail if you did that. If Congress passed a statute like that and they went after Khalil under that kind of statute, that would be like Abrams. Anybody prosecuted on that statute, First Amendment violation, statute would be thrown out, can't be punished. And Khalil would have the benefit and protection of the First Amendment in that case. And just like Abrams, he couldn't be prosecuted either. Similarly, if the police broke into Khalil's apartment to search for evidence without a warrant, without probable cause, he would have Fourth Amendment rights as a lawful permanent resident with substantial connections here. And those Fourth Amendment rights would protect him from police coming into his apartment whenever they want, without a warrant, without probable cause. But supporters of this deportation are going to say, this is a different case. This is deportation. Now, how could that be? The Supreme Court's never said anything like that, right? I mean, deportation isn't different. That doesn't change the picture, does it? Well, supporters of the Trump administration are going to say, yes, it does, and yes, the Supreme Court has so held. And they're going to point to cases from decades ago where the Supreme Court said exactly that. Back in 1953, the justices said, and I'll quote, "Courts have long recognized the power to expel or exclude aliens as a fundamental sovereign attribute exercised by the government's political departments." Political departments, that means Congress or the president. Exercised by the government's political departments, largely immune from judicial control. What the court's saying there is it's for Congress, not for the courts, to decide when it comes to deportation. And there's similar language from a 1952 case dealing with lawful resident aliens who had been in the country for decades. And the court said this, I'm going to quote again, that staying, quote, within the country is not an alien's right, but is a matter of permission and tolerance. The government's power to terminate its hospitality has been asserted and sustained by this court since the question first arose. Again, the court is saying the power to exclude and deport, that's for Congress, not for the courts. Now, that 1952 case, it's not totally dispositive. There are complications in it that I haven't gone into. And the majority in that case actually says some things about the First Amendment that would not even be agreed to anymore. But today's justices, they may look for guidance on this issue less to the majority opinion in that 52 case and more to Justice Felix Frankfurter's concurrence in that opinion, which is stronger and clearer and more emphatic. Now let me read you a quote from Justice Frankfurter's opinion so you see what I mean. Here's what he said. "The conditions for entry of every alien, the particular classes of aliens that shall be denied entry altogether, the basis for determining such classifications, the right to terminate hospitality to aliens, the grounds on which such determination shall be based, have been recognized as matters solely for the responsibility of the Congress and wholly outside the power of this court to control." That's very strong language. The right to terminate hospitality to aliens, that means to deport them, is, quote, the responsibility of Congress and wholly up to Congress and outside the court's power to control. That's saying it's a political question. It's up to Congress. Courts have nothing to do with it. And it's basically saying that in this context, deportation, aliens do not have the same constitutional rights as citizens. And guess what? There are many other cases where we know this to be true. At least the law is settled that this is true. Every citizen, for example, has a constitutional right in this country to vote, if they're over 18. But aliens do not have a constitutional right to vote. Citizens have a constitutional right to contribute money to political campaigns. Current law says that aliens do not have a constitutional right to do so. So it's pretty well accepted and established already that in some contexts, aliens, even lawful permanent residents, green card holders, do not have the same constitutional, even First Amendment rights as citizens do. And so that's what supporters of this deportation are going to jump on. They'll say deportation is one of those contexts, and aliens, look at these cases that we've been quoting, do not have the same constitutional rights as citizens. And if today's justices want to side with that, they'll look at another argument too. And this is an argument being made very forcefully by folks supporting the deportation. In fact, Secretary of State Rubio made this argument very strongly just a couple of days ago. Let's play the clip and you'll see what I mean. Let's take a look.
How you you that if you tell us when you apply, hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa. I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages. And by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities. I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would. If you actually end up doing that, once you're in this country on such a visa, we will revoke it.
So today's justices, they might look at what Secretary Rubio just said, and they might say, you know what, there's a point here. When Khalil entered this country in 2022, that provision, the one saying that aliens can be deported if they espouse or endorse terrorism, terrorist activity, that was already on the books. In fact, it was enacted in 2005. So Khalil was on notice when he came into this country that you can't do that. In other words, he consented to that limitation when he came in. That's how the argument will go, because it's well established that people can consent to certain limitations on their constitutional rights if they accept governmental benefits. So the argument's going to go like this. Nobody made him come. If Khalil wanted to take advantage of America's educational opportunities and all the other things that America has to offer, and he wanted to come here on a student visa, well, he was aware, the statute told him that if you come here, you cannot endorse or espouse terrorist activity. You do that, we're going to deport you. He was on notice that that was true. In essence, by choosing to come, nobody made him come, by choosing to come to this country as a student, given the limitations that Congress imposes, he was bound by that limitation, he consented to that limitation, and he cannot now try to evade or get out from under it. So that's how the argument's going to go. And where does that leave us? Well, I'll tell you where I think it leaves us. If you're asking me what's my prediction of how the courts are going to go, I'll tell you what I think. I think that given this cross-current, these cross-cutting precedents, sad to say, but it's likely that judges' reactions to this case will divide or fall along the usual partisan lines. I hate that. I hate to say it, but it's a pretty good bet. Here's a decent bet that that judge in the Southern District of New York, if he gets to keep this case, he's going to enjoin this deportation. Whereas, another decent bet, I'm not saying I know, but another decent bet, the more conservative judges in the Fifth Circuit, that's the court that will be presiding, the appellate court will be presiding. If it goes to Louisiana, they are much more likely to uphold this deportation. How about the Supreme Court? Well, here's the truth. Nobody knows how the Supreme Court will decide this case. Anybody who says this case is open and shut, clearly established, obvious which way this case has to come out, they're just mistaken. As is anybody who thinks they know what the Supreme Court's going to do with this case. Okay, that's all I've got for you. Goodbye for now, and stay tuned for more episodes. As there are more developments in this Khalil case, I'll keep you posted. Goodbye. Okay, that's all for now, folks. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, leave comments on YouTube or on X, and stay tuned and check out all the other episodes and future content. Thanks and goodbye.